Well, welcome. Actually, is a steering committee meeting. All right, so we are welcoming you to the joint meeting of the City Council and the School Board, just ahead of Town Meeting Day. And as my fearless leader, Helen Reilly, our fearless leader, is out of town, I will be the acting chair. So we start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Kate, would you like to lead us in that? Nope, I would prefer for you to do so. Oh, mind. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. I have to say that having been in the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, last weekend for a conference, saying the pledge. You cannot hear us? Sorry. I was just saying that having been to Philadelphia last weekend, the birthplace of the Republic, it's actually has a different meaning tonight for me to say the pledge. So I'm going to hand it over to Jessie Baker, who's going to give instructions on exiting the building in case of an emergency, and she's also going to review our technology options for those of you who are online.
So thank you for those who are here in person. Thank you for joining us. If there's an emergency tonight in this room, you can go out to the rear of the auditorium, either to the left or right, and then turn left or right to get outside, likely the way you came in. For those participating remotely, if you would like to speak during any item on the agenda, please indicate that you'd like to speak in the chat or turn your camera on, and the chair will call on you. Otherwise, we are not monitoring the chat for content. I would also encourage everyone to keep our conversation civil and our questions productive, and we'll have a lovely debate tonight. Thank you.
All right. And the next item on the agenda is the agenda review. So if there are any additions, deletions, or changes in the order of agenda items, this is the time to make that request. All right, and seeing none, we will move on to number 4. And this is time for comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda. So if you would like to say something, bring something up, bring something to people's attention here, you may do so online. And I'm guessing, Jennifer Carpenter, are you here to say something?
Yes. Hi.
Welcome.
Would you like? Thank you very much. When would you like me to speak?
You can speak right now. We hear you loud and clear.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Again, my name is Jennifer Carpenter, and I'm out here today as a volunteer with Let's Grow Kids. And just wanted to say something about solving our child care crisis. I think this is one of the top priority issues in the state of Vermont. And I think this issue is right up there with affordable housing and sustainable wages to make Vermont more affordable in order to attract and retain working families. We need childcare in order for Vermont to grow and thrive. And we need quality childcare in Vermont, as it is essentially to the healthy development of children. And it also enables the state of Vermont to thrive through a stable workforce. I'm really excited about the fact that we have passed Act 76, and I'm really hoping to see Vermont deliver on those promises. And I really want to thank my legislators, Representative Lalonde, Senator Ginny Lyons, Senator Chittenden, and Senator Rahm Hinsdale for having supported the Act 76. And basically, we've already seen signs of success in implementing this Act 76. Many programs have already increased capacity and have increased wages for staff. And starting next month in April 2024, more families will become eligible for child care financial assistance. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what Act 76, the Act 76 come to full fruition. It's the Act is supposed to expand, create more slots in child care programs. It is supposed to increase wages for child care workers in order to attract and retain a high quality workforce. It is also supposed to expand financial assistance eligibility for Vermont families. So almost 7,450 families in Vermont will become eligible this year, which is a huge impact. And also, it is supposed to increase access for children with special needs. So that means that there will be more opportunities for children with special needs to afford the equipment that they need, any special equipment in childcare facilities, and also to have one-on-one aid support. So I'm a big fan of Act 76, and I'm really excited to see that develop this year.
Great. Thank you for that very positive comment. And I also heard a request for continued commitment. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to address the steering committee here tonight? All right. We will then continue on. This is the main presentation, starting with the city budget, but followed by of course, other ballot items. I'm sorry. I'll try speaking more closely to the microphone. All right. So we're going to start with the main presentation, which will include both budgets, both the city and the school budgets, but also the other ballot items. And we're going to start with the city, and that starts with our city manager, Jesse Baker.
Great. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you to the school board for joining us, and of course to the city council for supporting this budget to send to the voters. So I have the extreme privilege of being able to present this budget to the community tonight, but it's after a lot of hard work from our entire leadership team, as well as the city council, who really dove into this budget during the months of December and January and made it their own and approved it to go to the ballot. So tonight I have with me Martha Machar, our finance director at the back of the room, Stephen Locke, our deputy city manager, Colin McNeil, our city attorney, Tom DePietro, our public works director, and we're going to share some of this presentation tonight. So to start, our proposed FY25 citywide budget is about $65 million. You can see here how that's broken out across different funds. The general fund, which makes up a little more than half of our municipal budget, is the fund that we use to pay for general government services, police, fire, most of public works, and your core government services. The rest sit in our special funds and in our enterprise funds, or our drinking water, stormwater, and wastewater funds that are paid for exclusively through the ratepayers. So of the $65 million, it's important to note that only $21 million of those dollars are proposed to be raised by property taxes. So the budget is interesting. It's progressing on my screen, not progressing on that screen. Hold on a second.
Can't do that. Hold on a sec. Time is of the essence.
Steve, you want to jump on just in case this doesn't work for me? Or Tom, are you on? Hold, please. It's telling me I'm not connected to the internet, which is why it's not advancing my slide. So just give me a second. Are you on?
Yeah, there was a little glitch for a second.
What? You guys are good?
I am
That's why I
connected.
didn't use the computer. I knew there was going to be technical issues.
Can I use your computer for a sec?
You don't, yours is not
I know it's not going on.
Go on over there. Yeah, it fell on the
Still
floor.
trying to get up.
Oh, what a waste of time.
Why don't you disconnect and reconnect?
I've been trying to do that.
That's ridiculous. Blank. I'm going inside now.
This conference will now be recorded.
Weird, you can't see. I can do it, I think, off hers.
He's got that.
Sure.
What do you want as a connector?
I don't have to connect, I can just do it through Wi-Fi. Well, this will be fun, folks. You can get off of GoToMeeting if you want. Oh, you know what? This may not.
I just want to make sure that works.
Can we do it?
This isn't going to work because I don't have. I'm logged on with sharing privileges.
It says connected security.
Oh,
But-
hey.
But yeah, now you got it.
Are
Okay.
you connected?
Yeah, I think you're good now. But are you still in the meeting?
Yeah. It does it from time to time. Usually I'm not
Says the
present.
organizer is no longer having technical problems.
Okay. We're back up and running. Well, somebody knock on wood to make sure I can stay back up and running. Colin, I've got your computer. Okay. So we were talking about the citywide budget. So the city budget as presented to the voters tomorrow on town meeting day accomplishes three primary goals. One, it maintains our commitment to our current level of service delivery offered by the city. Specifically, it makes investments in public safety. For example, completes the standing up of our second ambulance and adds a highway position to maintain our growing infrastructure. It increases our investment in sidewalks maintenance. It adds a part-time library position and increases our contribution to our housing trust fund. In addition to that, it continues our investment in school safety. With this budget, we are reinstating a youth services sergeant position that will primarily work with the school district and the police department to ensure that our children and families are best served. It includes 50% of the funding for the crossing guards around our school buildings, and also allocates $100,000 in our capital improvement plan to anticipated school safety needs on Dorset Street at the middle school and high school campus. And finally, it takes the first significant financial action to implement the city's adopted climate action plan. Specifically, in this budget, it allocates $190,000 to fund staffing capacity to support the work of implementing the climate action plan, including leveraging external funds into the city, addressing policy needs, and facilitating change across our community. And it also includes some allocation of ARPA dollars or American Rescue Plan Act dollars for the one-time costs associated with implementing that climate action plan in the next fiscal year. It's always important to note the assumptions that we have made, the city staff have made in developing this budget. So we are assuming pretty significant increases in our grand list, which is the total assessed value of all of our properties in the city, in both our citywide grand list as well as our TIF grand list, which is in our tax increment financing district in our city center. We are also anticipating a 7% increase in our local options tax. Those revenues have performed very strongly coming out of the pandemic, so we're comfortable with that increase. It, of course, includes our contractual obligations with our 3 bargaining units for a 2.8% COLA and associated step increases, the implementation of the new child care contribution payroll tax that was approved by the legislature last session for a total of about $48,000 that we are adding to our budget. We are seeing extreme health insurance increases as are most sectors of our society, so we have built that into our our assumptions, as well as increases in our property and liability insurance. So all of those numbers lead us to a proposed FY25 general fund budget of $35 million, with $21 million of that to be raised by property taxes. We are very fortunate on the city side that the formula to come up with the municipal tax rate is very straightforward. It is the revenues we need to raise over the grand list. So when you do that calculation, it results in a 5.8% increase in the tax rate. For the average condo owner in the city, that equates to about an $85 annual increase for next year. And for the average homeowner, a $125 annual increase for next year if this budget is to pass. I do want to note here that we don't provide that number for commercial properties because they vary so widely in their assessed value that it would be not a meaningful number. I do want to note, though, if you remember back to that first slide before I had my Wi-Fi issue, we talked about the whole city budget. I think it's important to note because our utility ratepayers and our property taxpayers are indeed the same folks. Thank you. That with our with our utility rates, as the council has established, across our stormwater, sewer, and water utilities, it is anticipated that the average homeowner will pay about $64 more next year. Those cost drivers are really staffing costs related to that health insurance and COLAs I previously mentioned, as well as capital cost for the capital projects we are implementing or have planned. And then finally, it's always useful to look at where those tax dollars go across service areas. So you will see in this chart, it is primarily public works, police and fire, and then administration, which is the backbone organizations that keep our city running, like finance, HR, IT, legal, my office, etc. So with that, I will pause and we will go into the next agenda item, which is our bond vote, unless you would like me to do something.
No, please continue.
Tom, come on down.
Good evening, everybody. You hear me okay? Great. So I'm Tom DePietro, Director of Public Works, and I just have a couple of slides on a bond vote question that everybody will see on the ballot tomorrow. This relates to construction of an additional water tank on Dorset Street. It is construction of an additional 2.1 million gallon tank. It's a welded steel tank. It is going to look very similar to the existing one. And you can see on the screen here a photo of the existing tank, and this one's going to be going right next to it, or is proposed to go right next to it. So a very quick overview of our water system for folks that may not be familiar. We work with the Champlain Water District, who also functions as our water department. So the Champlain Water District draws water from the lake in Shelburne Bay, treats it and pumps it around their service area. So that water gets pumped up from down on Queen City Park Road, all around the city, but specifically to our tank. And from there, the city sells it to our residents and businesses. So South Burlington is divided into two service areas. There's the main service area, which is basically everything west of Spear Street, and then the high service area, which is everything generally east of Spear Street. This tank will be constructed in the high service area to provide more water in that location. A couple of things to note about the project. So the tank has been sized so that it will serve South Burlington for the foreseeable future. So we should not need to add any additional water in the high service area for 50 or more years by engineers' calculations. It allows us to meet some regulatory requirements. So we get our water, like I said, from the water district, and they can always pump more up the hill as we need it. But there are regulatory requirements that say we have to have so much storage in the city. And I'll get to that in a second in a little more detail. And also additional storage is there in case we need it for an emergency. So if there's a pump or pipe failure, like some folks may have recall happened on Christmas Day, or if we are doing some firefighting activities or other activities that might draw a lot of water, there'll be more water available to us. One of the important things it does, it provides some redundancy. So in the future, if we have this second tank, we'll be able to take one tank offline so we can conduct some maintenance, whatever that might be, and still serve the city with all the water it needs. And just one note, This is about the volume of water required to serve South Burlington. It's not going to do anything to change pressure. That is dictated predominantly by elevation. And so since this tank will be very similar to the existing one, it's not going to do anything to change pressures throughout the city. So I mentioned sort of a regulatory driver for this project. This pie chart represents the 2.1 million gallons that are in the existing tank. So you can see in the large blue portion there, about 1.4 million gallons per day are what we currently use in the city. The other large portion, about 500,000 gallons per day, is the allocated capacity. So that means if you are building a new home or a business or whatever it might be, we allocate you a certain amount of water to make sure it's there for your needs. And so that the allocation is part of what we account for. We have a small allocation through an agreement with the town of Shelburne. We provide them some water. And then there's a fire flow demand is the red piece of the pie. That's 42,000 gallons. Our proximity and relationship with CWD is great for us. It allows that piece of the pie to be a lot smaller than would otherwise need to be. And then our excess capacity of about 42,000 gallons, which is, again, what's really driving this. We get to about 90% usage. We're required to move forward by state law, move forward with construction of additional storage. Probably difficult to see, but the proposed project, again, same site, and it's going to be just right next to the existing tank. So the new tank is with the diagonal circle with the diagonal lines in it. 53-foot diameter tank, same height, 127 feet high as the other one, and again, similar capacity as the existing tank. Project cost summary. So the overall cost of the project is really in construction. And you can see how that breaks out here for a total project cost of about $5.7 million. I'll note that we've already received a $500,000 grant to support this project. And over the next couple of weeks, we'll be working to apply for another $1 million grant through the Northern Borders program, the Catalyst program. So we're excited for that opportunity. And we would hear back about some initial applications in April if we're invited to submit in the next round. So that's something we're working on now to help support the project. Impacts on rates at those project costs. So Martha Bachar, our finance director, and I had looked into some financing rates not too long ago when we put this presentation together. And so this is sort of a summary of what you'll see. We were looking at a 30-year loan at about 4.5%, which makes our annual payment about $350,000. That would mean that water rates increase by $4.82 per 1,000 cubic feet of water. So your average residents in the city would see about a $38 to $40, let's call it, increase in their water bill over the course of a year. And again, just to note, the values on this slide represent kind of a worst case scenario. So they don't factor in any reductions for grants we already have or may receive in the future.
It's not working again.
Keep talking.
More Wi-Fi issues. Yeah.
So I think the next slide is about regional rates. So I'll talk about that. So South Burlington has kept our rates very low. All of our utility rates are quite low. I don't know if certainly for the water, we may be the lowest in the state, but we're certainly the lowest in the region, similarly with wastewater.
Then it was project schedule.
Project schedule. So we are submitting permit applications right now. And then pending the outcome of the bond vote, we're doing final engineering right now as well, but we'll finish that up and we will bid the project out so we can have construction begin in the fall, or more than likely we're going to decide to start construction in the spring. That'll impact when we have to make our first loan payment. So we don't have to make that loan payment this fiscal year. We can make one in the future fiscal year. So strategically that might make more sense for us to do. So.
Thanks all for your patience. She's getting back online, I think. There we go.
Are you on? Can you go on to go to meeting? You're on go to meeting? Can you restart the meeting? Actually, I probably
How many computers can you actually, you have
Give
to
this one
move
back.
some down there. All right. Really? Is that what? I think it's Google. I think it's a Google thing.
It's actually reassuring, right? We always talk about human error, but technology just means there's more technology error. That's all.
Is that coming back up for you guys? Town meeting TV?
It says waiting for City of South Burlington BT secondary, but as you can see behind for maybe probably monitor.
It's appearing on for online.
There's plenty of room here for more computers. Acres.
It's saying it's back up now for me.
All right.
Hey, folks online, are you able to hear us? Was that you guys?
It scratched for us.
It's so interesting because on mine.
Just kick me out.
Jesse's back on.
How are you guys looking back there now? You're good? You're back up? I'm hesitant to do anything. So this is very interesting, guys. This has never happened like this. No, I think I'm.
All right. Are we back?
Well, let's just go from there if that is working. Tom. So this is where I believe Tom was.
So yeah, just to recap, this is the slide I was referring to of comparison of the regional water rates. South Burlington there on the left, like I said, we're lowest in the region. And then the next slide is the summary of the project schedule. So again, pending the outcome of the bond vote tomorrow, we'll be finishing up engineering and ready to advertise for bids late summer. And then lastly, just an example of the bond language that you will see tomorrow, relatively simple. A yes vote is in support of the construction of the tank, and a no would be otherwise. So that's it.
Thank you.
So we are prepared to move on to our charter ballot item, but I can stop there if others have questions or comments on the bond vote.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes. So anybody who would like to ask a question, this is a good time. And I'm going to just speak up. I'm going to follow Jesse's example here. If you'd like to ask questions, please come up to the podium here. Make sure that the microphone is on. And we are here and ready to answer any questions. Same for people online. If you have questions, can we see? We're
Town
just-
Meeting TV, can you minimize the, yep, thank you.
There we go. So usually we ask people to turn on the camera, and Jennifer Carpenter, your camera is on. So if you have a question, you can certainly ask it now.
No questions for right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I do not see a rush to the podium, and if a question comes up later, we can certainly answer a question at a later time. So I think this is a good time to move on to the charter change language.
Great, thank you. So about almost 2 years ago, 18 months ago, the City Council asked the Charter Committee to convene to talk about governance structures. We have several members of our Charter Committee in the room right now. Thank you, Wendell and Elizabeth, for being here. I think those are the folks who are here. So as part of that effort, they did a review of governance structures in the city and recommended to the council a series of recommendations. The council then did their own conversation about these proposals and chose to move forward to the voters a potential charter change that would increase the school board by 2 members, so up to a total of 7 members. So it's adding 1 4-year seat and 1 3-year seat to the school board. I should step back and say a municipal charter in Vermont is the community's constitution. It outlines how we govern ourselves, how we organize ourselves, and how we lead as a community. In Vermont, because how our constitution is set up, municipalities are what's called instruments of the state. So our charter has to be approved by the local voters. If approved, then sent to the legislature, they then take it up and contemplate the change being proposed. If they pass it, it then goes to the governor's desk and becomes state statute. So this charter change to increase the school board by 2 members, if the community chooses to move that forward tomorrow on town meeting day, it would then go to the legislature and the governor. So potentially it has the potentially it could go into effect for 2025 or 2026, depending on how quickly it goes through the state process. So all of those words or that simple concept of adding 2 positions to the school board results in ballot language that looks like this. A very long ballot item, basically showing the voters what is being changed in the document of our charter. So all of these words say we're going to add those 2 positions, 1 4-year seat and 1 3-year seat.
You're saying a 4-year seat and a 3-year seat, but it's a 2-year seat.
Oh, a 2-year seat and a 3-year seat. Thank you for correcting me. Any questions on that? So with that, I will wrap up our city side of the presentation by just reminding folks that the polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. tomorrow. On this agenda or on this presentation that's linked off of the council agenda for those participating remotely or for those in the room, you can click on the city website or the school website where all this information is presented, including our city budget and city school budget books and our annual reports. And while I have the mic, on a fun note, post technology issues, I want to do a quick plug for Illuminate Vermont, which is our annual street festival on Market Street. This year it will be the weekend right before the eclipse from 5 to 9. We'll be closing down Market Street. There will be food trucks and music and artisans, and please come out and enjoy the city, enjoy the community, and connect with your neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessie. All right, so we're going to be moving on to item number 8, and we're going to have the presentation of the fiscal year 25 school budget, as well as their ballot items. We have our superintendent, Violet Nichols, who's here, and I believe with some technology, we're going to...
Thank you so much, Megan. All right, good. I have screen sharing ability now. Yep. Now it's asking me for lots of security and privacy modifications here. Authenticating, entering password. Thanks for bearing with me. I bet you all didn't think this would be the theme of the evening, huh? All right. Now I have to restart to apply screen sharing permission changes. My apologies.
Thank you for your patience, everybody.
Violet, do you want me to share? Violet, do you want me to send it?
Yeah. Thanks.
Uh-oh, did we lose it again? I'm just going to grab them off the agenda. Maybe.
All right. All right, we're in business.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Violet Nichols. I'm the superintendent of the South Burlington School District, and I want to thank you all for being here tonight, particularly those of you in the room who have really stuck with us through a lot of conversations about the budget this year, and those who have asked good questions and supported us in a truly unprecedented budget year where we've had a lot of dramatic changes. Tonight's conversation is not, in fact, going to be about legislation. And in fact, I'd like to thank some of our legislators who are in the room. So shout out to Emily and to Brian, Noah, and Martin. Really appreciate your support through all of these changes. Many others, I'm getting smiles in the room, but appreciate all of the communication around just the budget changes. It's been helpful to know that as a community, we've been able to share information on what's been a pretty complex budget season with law impacting percentages that have been brought to the community just within the last few weeks. So thank you for the support on that. And with that, you know, Jesse recently said that the formula is pretty cut and dry on the city side. So for those of you who haven't been closely following this conversation, I have to now say that ours is not as linear on the school side, and there are a lot of different factors that make up the school budget. And so for those of you who are new to hearing about ed funding, I have to give my apologies in advance in that it's not one factor over another, which is budget over grand list. Yes, so we have a few more factors, and I'll detail those as we go through the slides. And Jesse, thank you for running these. So tonight isn't going to be about legislation that's impacted the budget. Tonight, I want to be really clear with the community about what this proposed budget is offering for our students and our staff and our community. And I'll start us off by talking about some of the highlights. What are the features? So we have been recovering from several years of pandemic-imposed challenges associated with education. This year, we're really critically committed to focusing on academic rigor. And one important component of that is a focus on early literacy. We have been piloting literacy programs and are hoping to implement a structured literacy curriculum, which is a research-based approach in this fall with the passage of this budget. I'm really excited about this. We know that the greatest indicator of success for students is the ability to read and to do so before third grade. So this is really important for all of our students and certainly impacts our community positively as well. With this literacy program, we have a number of professional support staff to help roll out the curriculum and to help us teach our students in ways that are research-based, which is really important. We've also got important school safety enhancements that are included in this budget. I'd like to thank, I don't see Chief Burke in the room this evening, but I would like to thank the South Burlington Police Department for their support. They've performed a number of safety audits on our schools and have given some great suggestions on how we can focus on school safety. So school safety is always always our top priority, followed second by education. I know some are surprised to hear that from the school superintendent, but we must always first and foremost keep our students and our staff safe. So this is really critically important and a part of this budget. Focusing on academic rigor and looking at following the law, right? So we have multi-tiered systems of supports, which are consistent with Act 173. This is legislation that is designed to create equitable and accessible learning situations for all of our students. So, we must be in compliance with that. And finally, there is on the ballot tomorrow a question that will ask the community to allocate a 2022 surplus of $2.27 million to go to our construction maintenance reserve fund, so that we can be thinking about putting less money on the community later on, as I'm mindful of big bonds, right? Yet we have a significant backlog of facilities issues that need to be addressed. So what can you expect to see tomorrow if you haven't already filled out an absentee ballot? We have a $71.2 million budget that will be brought forward to voters. This is about 13.9% higher than the fiscal year 24 budget, which is the budget that we're currently in. If you are only looking at the budget side and excluding a $1.9 million addition that was added to the budget due to the provisions of Act 127 language, which is no longer applicable. So that's a more technical way of saying at the time it made sense for the school board to consider investing in facilities in our school budget, given that there was a tax cap in place. However, about a week ago, this law changed with H850, and so I wanted to be finger pointing. I wanted to just draw your attention to that so you could understand that distinction. So with the passage of H850, we're looking at a 23.25% homestead tax rate increase from fiscal year 24. And again, this would have been 18.26% under the prior language of Act 127, which changed a week ago. So I want to be clear on that. I know it's been, folks have been trying to keep up with the changes, and I think transparency is really important around, how that change came to be. So looking at some of the expenditures and some of the revenues, very similar to what the city discussed as far as impacts of our 3 collective bargaining agreements, modest inflation this year as compared to last. Health insurance costs are a significant increase in our budget this year, with about 12% of an additional increase. And I think it's important to note that healthcare at the school level is negotiated at a statewide level. So this is not something where the district is able to renegotiate or to lower this near 12% increase for fiscal year 25. Interestingly enough, on the facilities side, this last bullet here under expenditures is the principal and interest payments on our ZEMS, which are the additions directly to my left at Marcotte Elementary here, and also at Orchard, which, thanks to you all, we implemented to address some enrollment issues that we were having at the time. Although, I'm going to now walk us over to the revenue side, because we're seeing it's anticipated that we were to receive about a 91% recoup of these fees, but we're actually exceeding that at its current rate. So this is a factor. This principal and interest is something that is almost breaking even at this point for the fiscal year 25 budget. We do have this previous surplus from the fiscal year 22 budget. So that would be the 2021-2022 school budget. This was a heavy pandemic year for us. And so a lot of this is services and professional development, supports for students that weren't realized due to just the limitations of in-person and virtual conditions at the time. So the state factors are, I think, really explanations for some of the significant changes in our funding. We had the tax commissioner's letter on December 1st. This announced a yield that's changed many times recently. We did just get a modest change in the yield last week, which was a slight adjustment. So bringing the tax rate down to closer to a 23% than 23.25. Again, we do expect this factor to change. It is not finalized until the end of the session, typically in June. The common level of appraisal is something that has had a pretty big impact on the school district's budget. And I've got a slide later on where I'm going to show you some historic tax rates. And I'm also going to show you, together with the tax rates, the common level of appraisal so that you can see firsthand how the factors impact the budget. So I won't get into that now. And in fact, that's the next slide. If you would kindly advance. Thanks so much. So I don't know how well you can see this in the back. I'll draw your attention to this blue line, which depicts a historical tax rate. So we're seeing a lot of numbers here near $1.06, right? And I want to say, I mean, you see that is the rate here too for the proposed fiscal year 25 budget. So it's at $1.66. So it's not in disalignment with historic tax rates, but I also want to show you this common level of appraisal line, which is these red bars. And the common level of appraisal last year, so for fiscal year 22, 23, 24, it was pretty high, right? We had reappraisal in fiscal year 22. It's a 3-year rolling average. And you see we also had an ensuing tax rate of about $1.32. Keep in mind, we had an influx of significant dollars associated with the pandemic relief funds. So ESSER, the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds. So those are some of the impacts you're seeing here. But this year, with a tax rate of $1.66, so again, I'll draw your attention to many of the rates between 2015 and 2021, right before we got the influx of pandemic relief dollars. Those were consistent tax rates. This year, with the CLA dropping to about 82%, we went overnight from having a conversation at the school board level of a 5% increase in homestead tax rates to that 8.26% that we'd been talking about up until last week. So this was a factor that had the most significant impact on the school's budget. And, there's a lot of reasons for this. We live in a really desirable community. Hopefully with, some increased development, we'll be able to alleviate some of the housing crunch that we're seeing, which is driving up, costs given just simple supply and demand, right? So this is a factor that we'll be watching closely. The lower the CLA gets, the higher the homestead tax rate will be for our community on the education side. And I want to talk to you about some of the incremental increases now as we move forward in our conversation. We are a business of people. It's what we do. We support people, educate people in the form of our students, and it takes educators and staff to do that. So about 80% of our budget goes to a combination of salaries, wages, and then insurance, again, with a significant, nearly 12% increase in those benefits for fiscal year 25. So with a proposed $8.6 million increase from fiscal year 25, you can see that a majority of this is due to salaries and wages, which were negotiated. And all three of our collective bargaining unions have now settled. And there are our teachers union and our support staff union are in year 2 of a 3-year contract, so they'll open negotiations in the fall. Our administrators have just settled. In fact, the board ratified that agreement on February 21st, and that is that's more of a rolling negotiation, but that's slated to be 3 years as well. So, another, I'll draw your attention to a few other components here. We have debt services, enhanced school safety, as we discussed, this being a critical place of investment. I'll bring your attention to a couple of pieces of legislation, most notably Act 29, which has provisions for school safety. And this is noteworthy because we've never had legislation around school safety before. And one of the proposed additions that we would implement here is a visitor management software, which would greatly increase security. So, we right now, we know that that's a critical need. So that's one potential project that is representative of this sliver here. So we'll switch gears to talk about the second ballot question that you'll see tomorrow, if you have not already voted already. So in addition to the first question that you'll see on the school side, you'll see a second question, which is the option to allocate the fiscal year 22 surplus of $2.27 million to our capital reserve fund. So when the board made this decision to bring forward this question to the community, there was a tax cap in place with previous Act 127 language. And what that tax cap did is it provided a band for expenditures. So between $64 million and $71.5 million, there would be only one tax rate, which would be 18.26. So you, the taxpayer, the community, would have seen no benefit to allocating this money as revenue. It would have been, there would have been no reduction in the tax rate. However, the community was able to realize a benefit at that time if allocated toward I'm going to call it a savings account of sorts. So money to put forward toward a potential new high school or middle school down the road, which we know are needed. Since then, the law has changed and the tax cap has been removed. This question remains on the ballot. However, the rules have changed. So with the modification of Act 127, the community could decide to, if the community voted no on this, then the board would have the option to reconsider this question. And the only other option on the table, which is option 1 here, would be to apply it as revenue, which would lower the tax rate. So, getting back to what does this budget give our students, give our staff, and give our community, we have really made significant efforts to reduce employees associated with pandemic relief funds, which expire September 30th of 2024. Last year, we went through the painstaking task of reducing by 21.5 FTEs, FTE being a full-time equivalent, so 40 hours a week. And this year, with increasing enrollment, we are able to add district-wide only a 0.6 FTE. So that is about one half-time employee. So it's about 30 hours, 25 hours of work for one person district-wide. And with this, we were able to really think about some of our model deliveries, special education, thinking about how we can have our most highly qualified staff working with students who have the greatest levels of support. This is in alignment with Act 172, legislation pertaining to laws around special education students. Also, as I mentioned earlier, but I feel it's important to mention again, this is prioritizing an elementary literacy program, specialists to support that program and work with students, as well as supporting our growing population of multilingual students. And we are prioritizing student-facing positions. So this means the people who are most highly qualified working with our students directly. What does this look like by school? You see this model change where we are rolling over the final ESSER positions, the elementary and secondary relief funds that we discussed, these federal dollars which propped up education and the bleak pandemic years. So we're rolling over some positions. Those are the health and wellness positions. Health and wellness standards are required by law to be taught in our schools. And we're also finding that there's a strong connection between health and wellness, education, and social emotional learning, mental health. So you see a lot of modifications here around special ed with fewer paraeducator positions and more special educator positions. So that would be the difference between licensed and non-licensed staff. And again, that's in alignment with Act 173. So you have a total of 0.6 FTEs district-wide between the additions and the modifications there. So with that, that concludes my presentation. Jesse, thank you for advancing the slides for me. And again, my apologies on the technical difficulty. Happy to take any questions or comments at this time. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Violet. So this is again time for members of the audience, both here in person as well as online, to address the superintendent or the city manager or any of us about what you have heard tonight. I'm just hoping everybody knows what the CLA is, which is, yeah.
Yeah, common level of appraisal is the difference between what homes are appraised for and what they're selling for. And so it's based on a 3-year rolling average, and that feature is intentional to create consistency, right? So we don't typically, and historically, we didn't see those dips that we saw this year. And again, there are a lot of factors that have contributed to the significant dip in CLA. This year in South Burlington, again, I mean, we're seeing a lot of growth, which is a good thing. And, you know, typically growth and an increase in housing will help level out this number. But as, you know, we've discussed, there's a housing crunch, and with supply and demand, I think, you know, we're seeing, and I know the council is working to address some of both the supply issues with the plan developments, as well as some of the affordability issues. Happy to take additional questions on that if further explanation is helpful.
And I think it's important, too, for people to understand that, in fact, we're paying less property taxes than we should be because our homes are worth more than their assessed value. So I think that's important for people to understand. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Megan, could I ask a quick question?
Oh, yes, please do.
I'm over here. Megan, I'm way over
Oh,
here.
Larry, I'm sorry. It's a big deal.
So thank you for that. I think you hit on some very confusing topics for people to understand in terms of how ed is financed and paid for. I'm hoping the school budget passes tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if, when it does pass, does that have any ramifications on current state thinking?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Larry, for your support, as always. And I have to say, too, I mean, the council has been so supportive. This is, the third, fourth conversation we've had together around this, so I appreciate the ability to keep you all updated. I can share... I can share a little bit about what I know, and then, you know, I don't want to put any of our legislators on the spot, but, I can share what I know from a school side, which is that I know of 2 districts who have decided to modify or postpone their original budgets. The reason I think that's significant is because most schools, most districts decided to move forward, right? So that is a pretty powerful statement. I think, anecdotally, there's been a lot of really good media coverage on school budgets. I think that's a good thing because I think it's helped our community be informed. And I think there's been really honest communication from our legislators and, from those at the state level around some of the changes. I think that with that coverage, it's been expressed to me that there are some who are heading to the polls with a bit of trepidation. I certainly understand that, I've been in a public position and on this very stage multiple times providing different homestead tax rate increases, right? And so I think we're talking about a really complicated formula. And I think, there are those, I would put myself in this category, and no one will be surprised. I will always approve a school budget, right? So I know what that is always. And I know others fall into that category. They've expressed it. I've also heard from others who have a variety of concerns, and I certainly understand those. But I do think, Larry, to answer your question, I don't have a good answer, but what I can say is that the Chittenden County schools, which are most significantly impacted negatively by the CLA, have all chosen to move forward with budgets.
Great.
I'm sorry, that's not a complete answer, but I don't know as far as, all right, Brian's coming to speak from the state side. Thanks, Brian.
For what it's worth, yeah.
So please state your name for minutes.
Yep. Brian Minier, Chittenden 11, state representative. That's everybody west of Dorset and north of Swift. So I can answer some of what you're asking about. I think there's broad consensus in the State House that the way we're funding education is unsustainable. In the short term, we're looking at new sources of revenue, but this is mostly going to come not through my education committee, but through Ways and Means, and we've been taking testimony with them. In terms of where that revenue comes from, you could look at a sugary beverages tax, you could look at a tax on the cloud, you could look at disaggregating second homes from businesses and try to put a tax on second homes, vacation homes. One that I'm enamored of, and I'm not sure that's true for the whole State House, is just getting property out of there. The property market is so volatile, and for an older person whose asset is going way up in value and is on a fixed income, having a house that's worth a lot isn't putting money in their pocket to pay their taxes. So I hope that we will get away from the property portion into a strict income funding mechanism. But all this stuff takes time. I think as hard as this year is, next year is not going to be much better. And so one thing we're trying to do in education, which I can speak more to, is we're trying to revive the state level funding of school construction. And within that model, we hope to incentivize, for instance, right-sizing schools. I don't know if that ultimately means consolidation in more rural schools. I think it probably has to. That will have to be, of course, coordinated with the local population. And I'm hopeful that at least some will be able to be convinced that by doing that right-sizing, not only do you save on your property tax, on your education taxes, but you also end up with better offerings in your schools. The efficiencies of scale provide that. But these are all medium to long term. And, do they pass? What does it look like? I don't know. But those are ideas that we've been putting forward, some of which we talked about in our legislative forum last week. And for anybody who wants to hear more about them or offer ideas or talk about it in person, we do this every fourth Monday of the month at the library. And we would love to see people show up to it. And if there are more questions, I'm happy to sit here for a sec, but that's pretty much what I got.
Thank you, Representative Minier. I do have a question. Let's just say that I too am going to vote in favor of the school budget, and I do encourage people to. I think our schools are our greatest asset. That is what makes this community a thriving and a prosperous community. And it makes certain that we also are a community that's investing in its young people and its future. So I really do encourage a yes vote. Let's just say that there are a number of school budgets that do not pass. What will the state legislature, I know this is a huge question, for one representative to answer, but are you prepared to respond?
I guess I'm not sure of the question. If the school budgets fail, presumably the local school boards will put forth a different budget and see if folks will pass that one. I don't know how much I can say about the state perspective. What would you be looking for?
Well, we've been hearing about, loss of arts, music, foreign language, sports teams. I mean, the list goes on and on about what that could mean.
I mean, correct. And without other revenue under the current model, there is nothing for the state to do about that. Anything that can be done would be 1 year or two minimum, and that's for the sort of more short term, looking for other sources of revenue. The longer term, I think we have to talk about just restructuring how we finance education. But yeah, no, that I don't think there's a cavalry coming if the vote fails.
Thank you.
Yep. And before I go, thank you for all the years of service. I missed the gathering to congratulate the other day, so thank you.
Thank you, Representative Minier.
I'd like to
Oh, yes, please,
just
Kate. Yeah.
add a couple of demographic factors that haven't been mentioned yet this evening as we think about where South Burlington sits in the larger statewide landscape. About 60% of South Burlington, last time I checked my numbers, is eligible for the income sensitivity tax credit. So the tax rates that you're seeing presented tonight are not factoring in a tax credit that about 60% of the majority of South Burlington residents are eligible for. And we do have the factors in Act 127 have different weights depending on what type of students you have in your district. And we do have about 30% of our students are eligible for free or reduced lunch. And so as we think about our community and we think about, we hear language about wealthy towns and poorer towns, I just want us to think more broadly about ways that we have more connections with our neighbors in other states outside, other cities outside of Chittenden County and across the state. We're really, I do see our education challenges and spending issues as a statewide issue. We all have the same health insurance rate increases, and there's really a need for a statewide response to these local challenges.
Please state your name for the purpose of the minutes.
I'm Kathleen Easton. I'm a resident of the city of South Burlington. And, I do love it here in Vermont, this small state in the northeast region of our nation. And one of the things I've come to enjoy and respect is because our state population is so small and our city population is only about 21,000. We tend to know our neighbors maybe better than larger towns. And I think we tend to be willing to listen to each other and hear different points of view. So I hesitate to make remarks tonight because what I say may be perceived as being offensive, and that's not my intent. Basically, I look at all of this, and I've gone to many different hearings, and I wonder, how did we come to this position? We talk about wanting our state to be green and clean, to be economically prosperous, to provide opportunities for our youth to grow and prosper, to create a place where people will want to live and to be able to afford to live. So how is it that we find ourselves gathered for a meeting to discuss runaway budgets and tax levels that seem to have no ceilings? I've listened to the City of South Burlington School District budget presentations now about 6 times. I think that's probably a record. I watched the school board members nod to each other as if they understood the convoluted financial calculations which will dramatically raise our taxes. And I've even seen them laugh to each other and talk about taking the road show out to the public to somehow attempt to convince hardworking people that this budget is worthy of support. And I think the most apt visual that the board came up with in their budget presentation was that takeoff on that work of art, The Scream, depicting a nightmare's image. In addition to the budget presentations, I watched the video of numerous Vermont school superintendents trying to make their cases to the state legislators, explaining that their districts are facing financial ruin and taxation revolts. So many of them and others tried to make the case that the recent laws and proposals that have so dramatically impacted local expenditures were well intended, and that the actions of legislators had unintended consequences. And as just a person out here, I wonder now, how can that be? They come from wide-ranging backgrounds. They're surely capable individuals. They have competent staffers. They have access to all kinds of data and calculation tools. And yet now they say, oh no, what happened? So I guess personally, I believe that the people who represent us, especially at the state, have a fiduciary responsibility to look out for what is happening in the state, and not just try to put in a fix that's kind of post haste and in a hurry, and I don't know how permanent it will be. And meanwhile, the taxpayers, I just read some statistic that almost 60% of adults live paycheck to paycheck, and almost 60% of Americans do not have enough savings to handle a $1,000 emergency without borrowing. And you look at the credit cards, and everybody is getting maxed out on that. So when you try to present these budgets to citizens, and they're trying to get a grip on them, and then you look at single family houses that are going up here that are 800,000, that in order just to get into it, you have 200,000. And that's for the down payment, the closing costs and fees. And if you want to continue to live there, you better have $6,000 a month. But no, you could buy a duplex instead, and that will only cost you maybe $500,000 to $750,000. And with that, all the tax implications. So I personally, I'm telling you, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what it is. But I think that there's a tension in our state, in our community, between those who want to espouse certain agendas, whether it's a very green agenda and they want to make that the forefront. But to me, having been an educator, education is important. We have to find a way to support it. But we also, as Violet Nichols has said, literacy proficiency is one of the greatest indicators of success. So I think schools start to better be more transparent about the test results and how they're going to deal with these things. So whether I can support this budget or not, I don't know. But I think that somehow going forward, people better figure out how to make this whole system work, or people won't want to live in Vermont. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Easton.
Wendell Coleman, I live up beyond the radio stations. And, excuse me, I think there is a structural problem in South Burlington school system and every other school system in the state, as far as I know.
Sorry. Can you
Your mic is on.
Oh,
push the button in the middle?
okay.
There you go.
Sorry about that. I got it close to me, but Wendell Coleman, I live up by the radio stations, and I would like to point out what I think is a structural problem in South Burlington schools, and as far as I know, every other school in the state. The overwhelming amount of salaries go to the top earning people already, which makes it very hard for young teachers to get into the system. Those high-paid teachers are going to be leaving. We don't know exactly when, but they're going to retire, and we're not in a good position to recruit. Furthermore, in my 70-plus years experience with school systems, from a one-room school to, as a student, to chief negotiator, teacher, public and private, longtime school board member, I have never felt that I saw any statistical connection, at least any very significant one, that showed that long-serving teachers were better educators than much shorter-serving teachers. It's about knowledge, and even more, it's about personality. And I think until we change that dynamic, we're going to have serious problems with our schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coleman.
Usually I'm online, so I don't come in person. Emily Krasnow, representative for Chittenden 9. I just want to acknowledge that the assertion that many of us are in Montpelier and not aware of how painful this could be for many folks. In my district, I've been having conversations every day with people who are seniors and struggling, folks who come into the food shelf that I see, trying to figure out how they're going to make things work when their income doesn't go up. Since I am a new legislator, like many of my colleagues, I was not there during the initial conversations, but have spent, along with my colleagues, every single day in Montpelier trying to look for solutions to this extremely complex and terrifying situation. So while it may seem like sometimes we're just like, this is how it's going to be, we're sorry, I can tell you that every day I am up all night trying to figure out how to make this work for my neighbors. And I plan to run again and to go back and to have it be a top priority the minute that we are back next session. Because if we don't come up with a sustainable solution to this, I'll continue to see people I care about, who I've lived next door to for over 18 years, have to leave. And those people can't afford to just roll with things and make things work. And I want my neighbors to be able to age in place and live in Vermont as long as they want, and not have to worry about those financial implications. I do understand what it's like working paycheck to paycheck and not having a savings. My neighbors understand that. And I'm making a commitment here on record that I will not just let that go. And please hold me accountable next year to find long-term sustainable solutions to lift up everyone here in South Burlington that needs it most.
Thank you, Representative Krasnow. You might have to press the button.
I'm Richard Cassidy. I'm a longtime resident of South Burlington, and long ago I served 12 years on the school board. I have a deep intellectual commitment to the importance of education and a deep emotional commitment to our school district, because I worked hard to try and make it be as good a district as I could. I am going to vote for the budget tomorrow. I've never not voted for one. I'm deeply worried that this budget will fail. And I rise to ask this question in hopes that it might bring some of our residents who are on the fence in your direction. And that is this: if the budget fails, what do you anticipate you will have to do to get a budget that you think will have a reasonable chance to pass?
Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. So this is a question that our administrative team and I have spent a significant amount of time considering. Every reduction is not without a negative consequence, mostly to our students, right, who we work to support. Should the budget not pass tomorrow, the board will be considering options the very next day at our school board meeting. Those will look at largely tax rates that have a variety of options as far as how low the tax rate goes and what that would mean for cuts to programming. One piece of the new language in H850 is that South Burlington, as well as a number of districts, are receiving additional monies as sort of a reparation for the modification of the per pupil, what you would know as equalized pupil spending, right, which is no longer a factor in the ed funding formula. And so we're getting, Tim, is it 5 or 6 pennies for fiscal year, 6 pennies? You'll have to forgive me, the number was in discussion. So 6 pennies for fiscal year 25, that would be reduced by 20% every year through fiscal year 29. So that actually provides a little bit of relief, even though the tax cap has been removed. So, with that, there are a number of options that the board will be considering. We're in a position where without this 6 penny reparation, we were talking about significant cuts to the tune of maybe even $8.6 million to get to the current fiscal year 24 budget. It seems to me, and again, I don't know what the board will decide on Wednesday, but if we're talking maybe $3 million of cuts, we have, a few options. We could ask the voters to reconsider the $2.27 million surplus to apply that as revenue, which would drive down that homestead tax rate increase. There was $1.9 million that was added to the facilities maintenance reserve. That money is another area where funds were allocated toward resources. And again, this is sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul, because, I also don't want to be in a position where I'm asking the community for a $200 million bond, right? Like our neighbors are in Burlington. So, I do think it's prudent to advise the board to consider some sort of annual investment in long-term facilities. But I think that $2.27 million and the 1.9 are two levers where the board could make some changes to drive down costs. As I shared earlier, though, our greatest year-on-year expense is staffing. And if we know that we're going to have probably, in Jesse's slides, we saw an estimated 2% increase in home costs. So I can expect the CLA to be driven down further next year. And then we'll have 4 cents reparations instead of the 6. So I think that the board has to consider looking at staffing reductions this year. And so I think it's likely that the board would consider a mix of should we need to make these decisions, it would likely be a mix of facilities and staffing reductions. The staffing reductions, depending on where the board goes, could be pretty dramatic, impacting things like everything from the arts to athletics, languages, AP classes. It is my hope that with the 6 cent, reparation, that we don't have to get to that point, which was really a realistic possibility when we were first looking at cap removal without that additional provision to account for the equalized pupil change. So that is I think, a silver lining in this. So it'll, the answer to your question is, it's not clear at this moment, but I will say it'll be a mix of programmatic, staffing, and facilities reductions to get down to a budget, should the budget not pass on the school side tomorrow. I think my interest would be really trying to bring forward a budget that the community could support on a second run. Looking at the increase on year-on-year expenses, something below 10% seems like a 10% increase on expenditures seems, like something, a gold standard that we always seek to achieve. However, we are looking at about a 10%, increase year on year for staffing alone, right? So we wouldn't be able to achieve that without staffing reductions. I hope to utilize attrition should we need to. However, with 3 unions, the staff who will be RIFed potentially and who have job rights and recall rights would be looking at the teachers most recently hired. And so we couldn't realize the benefits of attrition in a one-to-one sort of nature. Of course, certain positions will always need filling, right? So I guess the answer to your question is that should the budget not pass, the community should expect to see likely modifications in the investment of facilities, which would cover everything from future savings to current, school safety upgrades, to looking at staffing across the board, certainly from educators, classroom teachers, larger class sizes, administrative support staff reductions. My recommendation, should the recommendation come to, unfortunately, if it comes to fruition, it would be across the board. It wouldn't impact one category solely. So happy to talk more to Rich if helpful, but the answer is we don't know yet, unfortunately.
Well, thank you, Superintendent Nichols. I appreciate your effort.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. Would anybody else like to make a comment or ask a question, including online if you put on your camera? Or I know that Livia has a green microphone. There's also a caller online, or Laura. That's you. Got it. All right. And Julia. If anybody online would like to make a comment. Okay. All right, well, I don't see anybody else who would like to make a comment. So that concludes the presentation part of this meeting. We are now going to adjourn, and there's going to be a debate team. No, sorry.
So there have been many opportunities to hear from the candidates over the past several weeks and a month. The South Burlington High School debate team did a remarkable candidate forum here in this room a few weeks ago. So we really want to highlight their work. So for those of you at home who have the agenda in front of you, there are links on that agenda for you to click directly to watch that forum. And for those in the room, please go home and find that link and click on it and watch that candidate forum. We will leave it at that for tonight.
Thank you. All right, very good.
Megan, I move to adjourn.
Very good. Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you.
Don't forget to vote tomorrow, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at your district.